Hi, good morning. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew, and we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. Now, this morning, I am going to speak briefly on education, because a lot of times I think many people in the world do not have a true concept or a clear understanding of what an education is all about. We often think that it is going to school and pursuing a certain course of study or studies that gives us that sort of education. And when you talk with people, you realize that they have no clue. Now, we're also living in dangerous times in which when you speak to people, they have this concept of what they've heard, what they've read in the media, right? In the press or in the broadcast media. And they think that that is the reality. Yesterday, I was reading a book called The $1 Trillion Conspiracy by Jim Marr. Very, very interesting book, to say the least. I have read two other books by him, and I think that he is a gem and a treasure. He was an American writer and author, and he has authored a number of books, right, which have unmasked the sort of deceptive system in which we live. That's the deceptive political economic system in which we live. And we've got to take stock. I have been saying that on this channel for a long time, that we have to take stock. We've got now to get our lives together, because a lot of us have already been deceived. And particularly after 2019, and you know what happened, particular 2020, afterwards, people have gone back into this sort of controlled mode, right? They are controlled, and the more you speak to them, is the more they think they know, and they think that they are not controlled. And that is what is very dangerous, when you are controlled, but you do not even know that you are controlled. And that is what happened to the Jews when Christ came on earth. But let me not digress too much. Let me begin to define what is education. And according to the Cambridge Dictionary, it says here the process of teaching or learning, especially in a school or college, or the knowledge that you get from this. So it's the pursuit of of knowledge, right, vis-a-vis school or college, or what they say university. And that is what people think that is an education. You go and you get your title, and you get your degree, your BSc or your BA or your MA, MSc, or your doctorate or PhD, whatever you want to call it. And people think that that suggests that the individual has an education, and they might have some knowledge, right? But it's how we use that knowledge that suggests whether or not we're educated, how we respond to that particular knowledge. Because one of the things that you must understand, in the school systems that we have today, they teach you what to think and not how to think. I repeat, in our school systems today, particularly in the public school system, but also in the private schools, largely, by and large, they teach you what to think and not how to think. And that is why you can go to left-wing universities like the Harvards and the Princetons and the Yales, and they indoctrinate you into a certain philosophy and mode of thinking. And if you go to a right-wing university, like some of your or Christian universities, in some cases, not all Christian universities are right-wing, by the way, but some of them are pretty, moving, their philosophies are to the right. For if you're a Christian, you ought not to be on the right, that's the political right, or the political left, right? People tend to think that because you're a Christian, you're going to be, moving toward the political right. No, because both the political right and the political left are controlled by the same people, right? And it's not controlled by God. And you've got to understand that. Now, it doesn't mean, therefore, that there are not some values on both sides that you can embrace, right? You can embrace values on the right. For example, the belief in God, that God made the world, and that science only cannot unpack who God is. right, then you can agree with that. Now, you might not agree with their agenda in terms of wanting to foist Christianity upon the entire populace. But you will agree that, of course, the fact is that God is the center and sits at the center of the universe. On the political left, we believe in racial harmony, right? In racial equality. We don't believe, however, Christians should not believe, however, that you should steal from Peter to give to Paul, right? That is not what the Bible enjoins upon us. In fact, the Bible tells us that thou shalt not steal, and that God is going to be the eventual judge. Now, the agenda, the objective is good, but the agenda is always not the best, right? So we often have to look at the agenda and not at what they're doing. What is the agenda? And you've everything that your politicians do, you've got to ask yourself that question. What is the end game? What is going to be the ultimate agenda when they do whatever they're doing? I think many of the times, if you ask that question, you will get more answers than you can imagine. But the what's his name? Jim Marrs, rather. Jim Marrs is quoting largely, he's suggesting ways in which we can reclaim our society, right? Because we're moving to tyranny, and that is very obvious. And he is citing some solutions in how we can get back to, or we can reclaim our liberties, or civil and religious liberties, because that's important. If we lose our civil liberties, then we are going to be very, very damned, if you will. Now, before I go into his book, I did leave out the definition. Let me share my screen with you about this, about education, right? I've already cited to you a definition from the Cambridge Dictionary, which is basically the same dictionary, the same meaning in many of our dictionaries around the world. Now, we have this written by Ellen G. White, and she was one of the co-founders of the Seventh-day Adventist movement. Now, she says here, and I think this has stood the test of times, right? Our ideas of education take too narrow and too low a range. There is need of a broader scope, a higher aim. True education means more than the pursuit of a certain course of study. It means more than a preparation for the life that now is. It has to do with the whole being, the whole entire being. That is what it has to do with, and with the whole period of existence possible to man. It is the harmonious development of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual powers. It prepares the student for the joy of service. That's the purpose of education, to render service. A lot of times in our world today, we think education is just to earn lots of money and to brag and to boast that we have lots of money and we have accrued and we spend it on ourselves, and we think that that is what it's all about. But this is what it's all about, to render service. And that is where we gain our joys. And the whole point of the matter, and I've cited this to you, that 70% of US citizens are on anti-drug depressants, right? They're on antidepressant drugs. I beg your pardon, I'm mixing up my words here, right? So they're on antidepressant drugs. 70% of US citizens are on antidepressant drugs. And if many of them should render service, go and help, an elderly citizen or do something to help someone, I think that they would be happier and they would not have to be on any medication. But they have conditioned their minds that they need medications for such an illness. So we have here for the joy of service in this world and for the higher joy of wider service in the world to come. So that's what it's all about, right? God has given us education that we can render service to others. And that's what Christ came. He came to the world to render service to man. He said that he came not to be served, but to serve, right? He didn't come and have people wash his feet. He washed his disciples' feet and he is the highest being in the universe, by the way. But as human beings, we tend to educate ourselves because we want to be worshipped and we want others to recognize that, look at what I have acquired. Look at what I have garnered. I have this wonderful car and this wonderful home, and this is what you think is a signal of an education. And oftentimes, some of these are the dumbest people that you can ever speak with. Now, Jim Marrs is citing Mark Taylor in the book that he has written, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy. And he says back to basics and education is one of them. It may perhaps, and I'm quoting from his book, and this is on page 495, right? It may perhaps be the case that the media's blandness, rather, is only a mere reflection of the blandness and conformity that public school systems instill in the nation's citizens, right? So the education that is being imparted to students in the public school system is bland and seeks conformity, that you conform to societal norms and values, which in itself is not bad if the societal norms and values are wholesome, right? But we're living in a world today in which many of the values, and I'm talking about Western society right now, are not wholesome, neither are they values to which you would like to adhere. Mark Taylor, currently teacher at Olathe in South High School, this Olathe South High School, right, in Olathe, Kansas, hope I'm pronouncing that word correctly, believes that in order to win the struggle in the classrooms of America, teachers must first realize that today's public school system was designed by powerful economic elites. This is Mark Taylor now quoting, right, that the public education system that we have today, okay, were designed by powerful economic elites whose true intention was for students to think of themselves as employees in a system designed to dumb them down to be good little consumers of the goals that the purveyors of that system have arbitrarily chosen. One of the things that you need to understand, and I've read this many years ago, that when the US was founded, the number of entrepreneurs that emerged, was incredible. Now we have a system where we are actually employees, right? The whole matter of entrepreneurship, the concept of entrepreneurship is now being discouraged, right? And what you need to do now is to be a conformist and be an employee rather, not an employer, but an employee to an industry, right, to an institution. And during the pandemic, we heard a lot about doctors who were complaining that they had to work for large hospital institutions and they no longer have, or they have very limited family practice or personal care centers. That was not the case, let us say, 30 years ago. But the whole system has changed because the political economic elites require that we conform to a system that they have designed, and they so indoctrinate us. I would not use the word education. They indoctrinate us into being conformists, and that is what it's all about. This system has been sold to educators all across America as the values of a democratic republic. So they always talk about democracy, it's freedom and democracy, and freedom and democracy. And you have to also sometimes get a little book and cite the number of times they use these words, freedom and democracy. And you can see that it's an indoctrination sort of scheme and tactic that you have to be careful of. And that is why it's important that if you have children and adults as well who are controlled, their minds are also controlled by what they see on the media, what they see and what they hear on the media. And I've often said it is best if you turn off the televisions because they're not helping you to think. They're not helping you to think. Turn them off. Go and read a book and have a discussion with your friends and with your families. That will help you more to think. It was interesting when I taught Chinese students that many of them told me that their parents discouraged them from watching TV. They weren't allowed to watch TV. Why is it that the Chinese population, what do they know that Western societies like the United States, among others, do not know about TV viewing and the effect it has on the brain, dumbing down the brain, dumbing down the IQ. And when you talk to people often, that is what you see coming out. I was talking to somebody yesterday about what happened some years ago. I can't say because, the YouTube platform doesn't allow us to have dissident voices expressed on this platform, but the individual could not come out of the sort of controlled, news that he had gotten from a particular television platform, cable network, just could not come out. And I stared into his eyes and I could see how controlled he was, and genuinely controlled. We have to be careful. We have to move away from this political left and this political right and learn how to think and to look at the big picture, because neither the political left nor the political right is going to bring us redemption, as Bob Marley was suggesting in his redemption song. We've got to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, because many of us are mentally and intellectually enslaved, even though we have accrued or we have acquired a lot of knowledge. Doesn't mean, therefore, that you are responding or you know how to think. You might know what to think, but you have not yet been taught how to think. Very, very different terminologies. These teachers, whether they are university professors or secondary and elementary school teachers, should begin by addressing that lie and begin to use elite cover story of a democratic republic as a weapon to defeat the embedded design of subservience. Now, listen to what Taylor is saying. Taylor has spent his teaching, this is Mark Taylor, by the way. Taylor has spent his teaching career trying to instill critical thinking skills in his students. Now, listen to what Mark Taylor is saying, and I quote, "The essence of education," and I think this is very, very important, very brief, yet very profound statement. "The essence of education is not what we learn, but questioning what we learn." And I unquote. That is the purpose of a true education. When I was going to school, I was never a problem maker, right? A student who gave or challenged, who had behavioral challenges. Well, I wasn't, I didn't have any problem with that, and perhaps I must say that I came out of a Christian home in which I was taught good values and attitudes, right? And I was taught not to misbehave in class, right? And I liked that. And, to be frank with you too, I didn't give my parents, particularly my father, any sort of problem, so I wasn't a problem child. Where I was a problem child, however, was the fact that when it came on to my mental capacity, right? Even when I was 11, 12 years old, I recognized that the entire education system, I couldn't put my finger on what the problem was because I was too young. I wouldn't have had the experience nor the education to see what was the problem. But, I would redesign my schedule, in terms of what they gave to me. I said, I didn't like that schedule. And I redesigned the schedule that I thought they should have. And I gave it to my homeroom teacher and said, this is the sort of schedule. And I was, 11, 12 years old at the time. And I would also challenge, when I went to college, for example, I would challenge a lot of times the sort of knowledge that these professors, so-called, were trying to disseminate. Not all of the knowledge, but some of them had to be challenged. And a lot of times, professors and teachers do not like to be challenged. Why? They're also indoctrinated, and sometimes they have never thought about that particular question that you are asking, and it would make them seem it would belittle them and it would humiliate them. And I understand because I'm also a teacher and it's very, very humiliating when students ask you a question, and especially if they're asking you a number of questions. If they ask you one and you don't know it, you can say that I don't know, I will research it. But if they're asking you many questions, and like myself, there are some students who will be asking a lot of questions in one class, and it's going to be very humiliating for you if you don't know. And it's not just that knowledge, but you have not thought about that. And that's why it's very important that we read and we think, because as we think, we begin to look at matters and concepts that the ordinary mind does not look at. The first step to questioning what we learn is to realize that in order to think outside the box, we must learn how to think. And I can tell you, the large majority of people in this world do not know how to think. And hence the problem we had some years ago. People were willing to do whatever it takes, whatever people told them, safe and effective. And people thought that, yeah, why not? Hope you got the message, right? In order to know in order to know we are in it, we must learn how to think. And in order to learn how to think, we must learn primarily from the four horsemen of intellectual enlightenment. And this is what I wanted to highlight. These are the four horsemen of intellectual enlightenment. Let me list them for you. Number one, philosophy. Very important that we study philosophy. And I will put there / religion, right? Economics, that's number two. Political science, number three, and history. These are the fundamental courses or subjects we should be doing, or we should do when we are studying. Of course, there are others, but these are the foundational concepts on which we need to build, right? So I repeat, these are the four horsemen of intellectual enlightenment. Number one is philosophy. Number two is economics. Number three is political science. And number four is history, right? We have to understand what those subjects are about. But listen to what he's saying, that's Mark Taylor. From philosophy, we must learn about what is real and what is true and what is good. It's not only philosophy, it has to be education also. So he needs to enlarge that, right? We need some form of higher being and what is morality. And morality does not come from philosophy, it comes from religion, right? From economics, we must learn that wealth creation is an illusion created by powerful economic elites, right? That this matter of wealth creation, that we can all be wealthy and we can all earn billions of dollars. Now, the fact of the matter is that a few might. It's just like the IMF program, which suggests that, they are there to help people to, reduce their debt and to grow their economies. And that's not true. They might have a few examples. I don't think they have had any, but let us say they might have a few examples where that did happen, but it does not mean that that is the majority. It's an exception to the rule, right? So a few people might acquire wealth and people say, yeah, but look at this person. That person has acquired wealth, or that person, and that's how you are indoctrinated. And people buy all these self-help books and they think that is going to help them too. And perhaps you might be lucky, so why not? Try it. You might be lucky and you might acquire some wealth. But it doesn't mean, therefore, that this is a truism and it stands true for everyone. It's just out of luck and not out of principle. From political science, we must learn that the pursuit of politics is the pursuit of power, and it is tied to the secrets of economic wealth creation. Right? So it is the secret. It's a secret of power, the pursuit of power. That's political science, and how it is tied to the secrets of economic wealth creation. That is why we can see that many of these politicians go into into their various offices, sometimes moderately, wealthy, some very poor. And they leave there with a lot of wealth. They demit their offices with a lot of wealth because that is how it is, the system is set up, right? As people would say, that is the system at its best. Now, finally, we must learn that today's news, and this is important, we must learn that today's news is tomorrow's history. And since most of today's news is based on lies and deceit, most of the history is a lie. I unquote, right? And that was by Marr Taylor. And that is so true, right? Today's news is tomorrow's history. And most of the news that we read and we also view is a lie or are lies, right? Based on lies and deceits, right? And that is why we can't really always believe everything that we read about in history. We've got to read and to compare and contrast and look at the consistency or the lack of to see whether it stands up to light. We've got to do that, but many of us don't want to do that. Now, hear what he's saying here. There are teachers across America who teach their students to question the system through the pursuit of philosophy, economics, political science, and history. Every teacher who uses this formula will contribute to a moment in time when the critical mass of history will implode the designs of those who seek to enslave us all. And that was said by Taylor. Unfortunately, such teachers illuminate their charges in spite of the system, not because of it. To produce literate and functioning members of society, education must first offer all students a basic grounding in the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Past this, they also should be grounded in the history and philosophy of American freedom, or whatever country you come from, right? The history of, right, American freedom, or the history of Trinidadian freedom, or the history of Jamaican freedom, or the history of British freedom, whatever country you hail from, the principle stands true. Listen to what he says, and we're about to end. Not in simply memorizing names and dates, but more important, understanding why revolutions and wars were fought and what results came of them. We tend to sometimes think about revolution. Oh, we must have a revolution, but we also have to look at the consequences, right? And the after effects of these revolutions, right? Because some of them were nasty and they were the medicine that they claim that they would have given to you is, well, the cure, I should say, is worse than the medicine. Am I correct? Or the disease is worse than the medicine? Whatever it is. Can't remember the expression. Only with a truly educated and responsible citizenry can America regain its place as a leader among nations. With an increasing number of parents beginning to understand the worth of real education, not simply passing tests or fulfilling state-required curricula, they are turning to an alternative. So many Americans understand that the system of education in America has decayed. And it's even in private high schools. Some of you are saving up lots of your money to send your children to private schools in America. But some of these schools are also, and most of them are also not properly educating the children. And that is why you have to ensure that you educate them. And you need to set up a library. All homes should have a library containing these books, as he's suggesting. Books on religion, philosophy, history, political science, right? And economics. You need to have books on those and teach your children. Let them have these foundational courses and subjects. Let them master these foundational courses that they can be able to understand the world in which they live. Because a lot of times, if truth be told, many of us are not properly educated. We don't have it. It appears so. We appear to be intelligent, and we might be able to be engaged in decent intellectual conversation, but we are not able to dig deep and see beyond. One of the problems I'm having now, particularly with the American media, is that there is a dichotomy. There are two camps now, is Biden and Trump. And even when Trump was not in office, Trump has left this after effect that, it seems like he's an immortal person. They have immortalized him and his doctrines. And many of you don't understand that you have to look beyond Trump or look beyond Biden. Look at what they say and not who the people are. If Trump says something that has some truth in it, acknowledge it. If Biden says something that has some truth in it, acknowledge it. But put it up to light and see what is the agenda. You must always ask yourself that question, even when what they're saying looks or sounds good. You have to always ask a question. What is the ultimate or the underlying agenda of what they are saying or what they are about to do? If you had done that 4 years ago, many of you would not have made the decisions that you made, because you decided that you just want to hear and look at what you think you see before you, and you are not or were not looking at the ultimate agenda that was going to be unleashed upon you unapologetically. Unapologetically, because you did not want to listen. And I thought of sharing this with you because we are living in a time when our societies need to be educated. Because sadly, I think that what we have is or are centers of indoctrination. Thank you so much for joining. I look forward to seeing you in another chat or discussion. All the best to you. Great Friday.